Hi, I'm Saladin Ambar. Welcome to This Moment in Democracy. Today, we are meeting with Mike DuHaime. Mike is one of the most sought-after political and public affairs professionals in the country, having worked at the highest levels of U.S. politics in senior roles for President George W. Bush, Senator John McCain, and Governor Chris Christie, as well as being political director of the Republican National Committee. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Well, there's quite a lot of news as we're recording today on September 12th, 2023. Today, McCarthy in the United States Senate, Kevin McCarthy, just announced that he was going to approve the pursuit of investigations into President Biden, and his role, perhaps with his son, in activities that may well lead to impeachment. He's going to support an impeachment inquiry. What are your thoughts on that? And I think a lot of viewers, listeners, would want to know, how did you get involved in politics in a world that so many Americans are rather turned off by? How did you decide to pursue this line of work?
Sure, I'll start with that piece, I guess, in terms of my piece. I just kind of grew up in a family that cared about politics. My parents were both involved locally. I have four older brothers and sisters who never got involved, but are engaged citizens, and just felt like it was a little bit of a duty to get involved. And as I was here at Rutgers as a student, not exactly sure where my professional life was going to lead. I took a class here that I now teach, which is great, where they brought in practitioners of politics from both sides of the aisle. And I began to realize that at a young age, you can make a big difference, and that they're looking for young people to work. Not only could you make a difference, you could make a living, which I wasn't sure how I was going to do after college either. So I was able to work on small campaigns, and then kind of bigger and bigger and bigger. And along the way, I realized that in that line of work, very important people listen to very young people if they gain trust. And you learn pretty quickly that you can have great influence. You don't make much money, but you can have some influence on whether you're making your town better, your state better, your country better. And you quickly learn that most of the people on both sides of the aisle are in it for the right reasons, and many of us have common goals, maybe different ideas on how to get there. But I enjoyed it. And I also enjoyed the adrenaline rush of winning and losing campaigns. There's a competitive nature of it, especially when you're young, that it's exciting to be in a career where frankly, your job is at stake, winning or losing. If you lose, you can't pay your rent on December 1st, and that's a different type of adrenaline rush when you win and when you lose. So I enjoyed it, but I think there's some sort of calling of public service, even though it's not in the public sector. It is you're trying to make the country a little bit better, and I think that's the real calling that most of us have on both sides of the aisle.
Well, agreed. I mean, the Eagleton Institute of Politics is all about that, but obviously there's the darker side to politics that I think perhaps is a little bit outsized in most people's minds when they think about the current state of U.S. politics. How do you address friends, family, citizens who maybe are a little bit disappointed in our current politics? And then we'll get into Senator McCarthy and Joe Biden, et cetera.
Sure. I mean, I try to tell people and show people that most people who are in it for the right reasons, whether you agree with them or not. Most people do get in it because they're trying to make their country better. And I try to talk about a word, empathy. And most people have a really easy time identifying with people who are just like them, and a hard time identifying with people who maybe are different. And I try to give people some empathy about people maybe who are brought up differently, or a different religion, a different race, different part of the country, different sexual orientation, whatever it might be. Can you have some empathy and try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and then realize maybe they think differently, not because they're wrong or evil. They just have a different perspective. And I feel like 25 years ago in politics, when I was coming in, there were arguments over policy, but we didn't hate the other side, and there was a mutual respect, and that has gone away. We've gone from wanting to beat the other side to wanting our opponents in jail, and that's a big difference. And there's some of that mutual respect is gone as well, and that's a bad thing for democracy. And I think the only way you can get it back is hopefully having some people who will lead by example. Eagleton does a great job, and I've often taught this class for many years with a Democratic counterpart, as I'm a Republican, and we try to lead by example in that way, and hopefully the next generation will see that the world is not Fox or MSNBC, that most people are actually in it for the right reasons, not just to vilify the other side.
To wit, is this McCarthy-approved investigation that may lead to impeachment? We don't know yet. Is this part of a new arms race in terms of, quote unquote, weaponizing either the judicial branch or Congress against presidents or former presidents? Or do you see it differently? How do you see these unfolding events with respect to former President Donald Trump?
I do think we have an escalation here where we feel like if the other side does it to us, we're then justified in doing it to the other side. And it feels quaint that we had two presidents in a row, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, who did not get impeached. But really, if you go back to Bill Clinton, he was impeached, and now Trump, and now it's being pursued with Biden. On the Biden case specifically, it doesn't strike me that there's evidence at this point to pursue it. Right. Therefore, I think it is trying to make him look bad. Now, he does have a problem with his son. His son flaunts the law. His son has been way too close to the line on things, but that's not the president. And we don't prosecute people for their family members. We don't hold them guilty for what their family members have done. And Hunter Biden, clearly there's an issue that his dad, even the New York Times today, said can't say no to his kid, and it's causing him political problems. But that's not impeachable, and I think I think Republicans have gone too far, too fast. I think Kevin McCarthy has a lot of pressure from members of his caucus that are in gerrymandered far-right districts, and they're feeling that pressure. Therefore, he's feeling that pressure. So he's not committing to impeachment. I'm not sure he ever will. I think this step alleviates some of the pressure within the caucus that he's taking a step forward in an aggressive way against the president, when so many Republicans do feel that the Justice Department is being weaponized. And I'm not one who really believes that, but I also am one who can look at and say not all four of the indictments against Trump really are necessary. Some are, some aren't. And the problem is one side now feels that they not only are justified, but actually now compelled to do it to the other side, because there's so much pressure from the high partisans that are in each side's voice, especially on the Republican side right now. They're very energized partisans who feel like the way to defend Donald Trump is to go out and attack Joe Biden, and the only way to do this. So I think McCarthy is reacting to members of his caucus who are reacting to the pressure they're feeling in their districts.
It probably doesn't help that this is an election year. We're entering the season. Yeah. We're in that season now, aren't we? Yeah,
and I think what I just described at some level is democracy, whether we like it or not, right? I really believe the pressure is coming from members of Congress who are feeling pressure from their constituents. Now, we could argue whether or not the districts are gerrymandered, and that's why, and if there are more swing districts, would there be as much pressure? But the House of Representatives is very fickle in terms of its, or the population is fickle, and the House of Representatives changes a lot. We went for a long time. We can look back. I think there was a change in the 1990s, and that change started a little earlier. We had numerous 5 or 6 blowout electoral college elections from 1956 with Eisenhower. You had Nixon. They had LBJ in 64. You had Nixon in 68 and 72 that were blowouts. 80, 84, 88 were basically all blowouts. 1992, we see the familiar blue-red pattern emerge, where the Democrats win everything in the Northeast, everything in the West Coast. They win in Illinois. Republicans start doing everything in the South, most of the states in the Midwest and in the Mountain West. And that change happened. There was also, Congress didn't change hands from the Depression until basically 1994, with one exception during Eisenhower's time for 2 years. So we went 60 years basically with one party in control of Congress. So everybody kind of got along. Democrats were happy to be in the majority. Republicans were kind of okay being in the minority as long as they got whatever they needed. And when Gingrich came in, there became this fighting spirit. But also at that time, the FCC changed some of the rules around the fairness doctrine, and that there was essentially it was mandated that there be equal time to both kind of liberal and conservative thought. That changed in 1987. So right around the time you saw the last kind of blowout elections where the country kind of moved as a whole. Country doesn't really move as a whole anymore. I think in the House, there's so much change. And the other thing is, I think the country's been pissed off, for lack of a better way to say it, for a long time. We didn't, like we just said, we didn't have massive change in those elections. When you have one party controlling the House of Representatives for 60 years, everything's kind of moving along somewhat smoothly, even though there were some rocky times during that time. But the country's been mad. So 94 to 2006, Republicans control it. 2006 is a real change election. People want to move on from the Iraq War and other issues, Hurricane Katrina. 2008 continues that change with President Obama winning. 2 years later, the country says, wait a second, what do you mean to go that far? So they give it all the way back to the Republicans again.
Right.
Then they decide to keep President Obama in 2012. They like divided government. So then they react again to 2014. I think the housing crisis and the mortgage crisis of the late 2008, 2009, 2007, that time, many people lost their value of the most important asset they had in their homes, and nobody got punished. Like, nobody got punished. Wall Street got away with it, and they lost their kids' college funds. They lost half their kids' college funds. They lost half the value in their homes, and nobody got in trouble. People who felt like they were playing by the rules. And so you saw a lot of anger in 2006, 2008, and that continued that change, but that kept going. 2014, 2016 is a complete change, obviously, to give Donald Trump, and then country then they say, whoa, we got to go all the way back. 2018,
Right,
then completely
right.
goes in the other direction. 20 continues it, and then 22, they give Republicans back the House. So we had very little change in all that time. But 2006 to 2022, there's incredible tumult in politics, and it's a very angry electorate that doesn't quite know what it wants and really doesn't want either side in charge. And I think the politicians are reacting to that.
Well, you go back to, you mentioned 1992, and I hate to promote another political scientist, but there's a guy out in Stanford named Mo Fiorina out there, wrote a book called Culture War, and he points to that period as well in Bill Clinton. But he blames, yes, the FCC changes, but also cable, the advent of cable television. Yep. And now, obviously, we're not only dealing with cable, but a social media era. Could you speak to how that technological change and this new media phenomenon has played a role in maybe stoking that anger?
I think it completely has. I think there is a self-selection that people have now for their news, and that we don't share a common set of facts anymore. The whole country isn't turning on to see what Walter Cronkite is saying tonight. You can now self-select. If you're a conservative, I can watch Fox, I can listen to conservative talk radio when I'm in the car, and I can get my news from Breitbart online, Breitbart News, and I can just get conservative thought all the time. From Democrat, I can do the same thing with the Huffington Post, MSNBC. I can get it reinforces what I already think as opposed to challenging what I think. And then your social media feed is filled with people who think just like you, because that's who you follow and that's who follows you. And you end up following people who think like you. So you begin to, it dehumanizes the other side because you begin to just only hear your point of view. There's never a challenge to your point of view, whether it's because you're selecting the cable shows you watch, but also the social media feed you have. Most people are surrounded by people who think like them. And there's very little challenge to that. And I do think the advent of talk radio with the changes to the Fairness Doctrine and then cable, and frankly, being a smash commercial success. I mean, Fox News makes a lot of money. MSNBC, not as much as Fox, but it's been successful in trying to copy the same model only on the left. So there's been commercial success in this in selling of political opinion.
Thinking about the current state of politics in the GOP, who among the current candidates for the presidency speaks to this anger in a way? Let's leave former President Trump out of this. Who among the current candidates speaks to this anger in a way that can not only win them the nomination, but perhaps even the presidency? I'm asking you to handicap. It's a little unfair, but this is your job, isn't it, to handicap
it's interesting.
These candidates? It's
interesting. Now, listen, I'm partial to Chris Christie. I'm supporting him. I ran his governor's races here. He's doing something different this time. I feel like he had a lot of the attributes that Trump had before Trump came along, without a lot of the negatives. I mean, he spoke truth to power. He was unwilling. He was unafraid to take on the media, and he was unafraid to go into parts of the state and country that don't always vote Republican and talk to them and do so in a challenging way, but in a way that I think gained mutual respect. But right now you see Vivek Ramaswamy trying to copy Trump, really. I mean, he's really what he's doing. I question the authenticity of what he's doing, or if he just sees it as a path. And then you see Ron DeSantis is trying. He's had a very disappointing campaign. I feel like he's a bit of a caricature of what polling says you should do if you want to try to beat Donald Trump. And I don't even know how authentic he really is about it. I think most Republicans at least knew two things about him when the year began. That was that he won re-election by a lot, and he was aggressive coming out of COVID. most Republicans were like, all right, those are two good things. But then when he started to get into, I'm going to fight with Disney, I'm going to fight with Bud Light, I'm going to change college curriculum, I'm going to change high school curriculum, I'm going to fight with African American members of my own party about slavery. I think people are like, this actually, never mind. We don't need, right. But I feel like he's trying to get to Trump's right on LGBTQ issues, on criminal justice reform. He's trying to get to Trump's right. And that's hard to do because Trump has just kind of created a new paradigm on what the right thinks and expects. So I think Ramaswamy's trying to copy it the most. I think DeSantis had that path, but I think the Trump voters don't find him authentic. I think they like him, but it's kind of like the real Coke and new Coke. Like if you like Coke, the real Coke is still there. The original is still there. Trump is still there, and that's the problem for I think Ramaswamy and DeSantis in trying to copy Trump.
Let's come back to Governor Christie. Can someone like Governor Christie, who takes on Donald Trump as vociferously, as straightforward as he has in recent weeks and months, can he win that nomination, or is he, as many in the media are suggesting, just playing a spoiler's role? There's some other agenda that he may have. Can he actually get the nomination from that party?
He wants to win. He's in this to win. I think you could ask that same question about everybody who's not Donald Trump. Most of the critics in the media say to every other candidate, why are you running? You can't win. But they're all saying somebody needs to take on Trump. Well, they're all trying. They're in their own ways. They're trying. At least they're in the game. Donald Trump in 2016, people thought he beat the establishment. The establishment sat on their hands. Most members of Congress, most governors, most U.S. senators, most donors didn't do anything until after he'd already won South Carolina, New Hampshire by double digits and almost won Iowa. The race was over at that point. And then they all decided to kind of get in. And even then, they weren't even saying who to vote for. They were just saying, don't vote for Trump. You got to get in and try to win. So for Christie, if he knocks out the champ, maybe you become the champ, right? Kill the king, people look around and say, who just killed the king? Maybe we should follow that guy. And so Christie is tough, and he is a great debater. He's the only one who's unafraid to tell it like it is when it comes to Trump. And I think the feeling for us as his friends and his supporters is that if you can be the one to take on Trump, people ultimately are looking for a strong leader and somebody who's willing. If you got to be tough and you got to be strong to take on Trump. The rest of the field was like timidly putting their hands up, saying that they would support him even if he was a convicted felon in the next election. Christie was the only one basically to say he would not. And so I just feel like that's the path in this campaign. That's a mistake most people made in 2016, was not directly challenging Trump. And so, he's willing to do it. I thought some of the others would, but they really haven't to this point.
No, I can't think of anyone else who's come remotely close. Give me let's play. I hate to do this, but let's do it anyway.
It's all right. I signed up for this podcast. It's all right.
I'm a political scientist. I'm used to contradiction, but let's do one-word answers on some of these folks in the field.
Okay.
Give me an initial reaction. If you can reduce it to a word, I'll let
you. Hard to reduce it to one word.
Let you one word and then an elaboration. How about that?
Okay.
Tim Scott.
Maybe in a political sense, or what I know about
politically, and his ability, handicap, quality of candidate, quality of politician.
Super person. Tim Scott is so well liked among the Republican Party, both in the people who know him and the people who don't but think they know him. He's super well liked. He's authentic, especially when he's talking about the right to life. I think he has an opportunity to connect with evangelicals in Iowa, and he'll compete with others for that space, certainly. But I think he's got the ability, like a Mike Huckabee and a Rick Santorum did in previous elections, where they got some wind in their sails in Iowa. But he's just so well liked and so well regarded. I think the first debate he was somewhat disappointing, but part of that is because he's like super nice and like didn't come out swinging like everybody else kind of did. But yeah, I think he's got a chance because Iowa will give him a chance, I think.
Nikki Haley.
Respect. I have a lot of respect for Nikki Haley. She did some tough things as governor. Well, one, people didn't think she was going to win for governor the first time she ran. She ran. She was an underdog. Sarah Palin actually came in and endorsed her when she was at her peak of popularity, and that really helped Nikki Haley. But I think she did some tough things in terms of taking down the Confederate statues and flags and things like that. If you've never been to South Carolina State Capitol, it's like not being from the South. It is like wow.
It's a walk back in time, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, when you're seeing like
beautiful city, great place, Charleston, the whole deal, right?
Yeah.
But it's a
but in the state capital in Columbia, it is like the monument to the Confederacy, and it is like shocking and it also makes you realize like, hey, I grew up in a different part of the country. Like this is different. Folks here are thinking differently than I am. But she took that on, and I give her respect for that. She also took on Trump when he was running, but then I think did her job, or did the real conundrum for many people when Trump won is like people who love the country basically trying to figure out, do I go serve this guy? But I want to serve the country and try to figure that out. I think Haley found a place where she could serve the country, maybe with a little bit of distance from Trump. I think that actually gives her some problems in this race because she's critical of Trump, but she was obviously part of his foreign policy implementation. So it's an interesting spot for her, but I do have respect.
You seem to think
Haley.
like Christie, if you're going to take out the sword, go all the way, metaphorically, right?
Yeah,
You've got
I think so. Yep.
Yeah, fair enough. Ron DeSantis.
Phony. I mean, I just think he's like... he's a Freedom Caucus guy, so maybe that's too strong, but I just really think he's been inauthentic in terms of this. I think he really is so practiced. Everything he does is to try to get a rise out of Fox News. I'm not sure he believes half of the stunts that he tries to pull, but somebody told him they focus grouped a bunch of Republicans in Iowa, and it works if you try to change, AP African American culture, curriculum. So I just think I just don't believe that he believes a lot of what he says. I find the longer I've been in politics, the more I find I have great respect for people I disagree with 100% of the time, as long as they authentically believe what they're saying and are trying to move in the right direction, move the country in the right direction, even if I disagree with them. I'm not sure how much, he actually believes what he's saying, or it's just, a means to an end in terms of trying to get some level of power up the ladder.
And lastly, for now, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Intriguing. I'll say that because he's got great oratorical skills, but I also think he's also completely changed who he was and what he wrote in his books about Trump and things like that. And I just think he's also. He's kind of in love with himself a little bit, and listen, most people in politics, when you look in the mirror and say, "Oh, there's 350 million people in the country, and I think I should be in charge,"
I can govern those guys.
There's no shortage of confidence among anybody who's running. He's at a different level, and I think I can tell you, every other candidate dislikes him on the Republican side. They view him as patronizing, and it's just somebody who said, "Hey, listen," he was on a podcast recently where he said he's been studying foreign policy for 6 months now, and here's what he thinks they should do. I mean, that is it's incredible to say, "Oh yeah, I picked up it's like a total like, hey, listen, I'm rich and smart, and therefore I could figure out how to get to come to global peace because I've read a book about it for 6 months." I mean, it's naive, and it's insulting to a lot of the people who have been doing this, for their whole lives. Now, he uses that as a positive to say he's coming from the outside, but I think for people who understand how hard it is, he comes across as patronizing.
Now, looking across the aisle, I'll give you one more name, but it's across the aisle, and you can assess this name however you choose. Joe Biden.
Good man, but probably past his time here, and I think that's the conundrum for Democrats. He won because he was the antithesis of Donald Trump. He has a wonderful life story from tough, Uncle Joe from Scranton and moved to Wilmington and all that, and obviously has dealt with incredible loss and tragedy in his life that I think even people who don't like any of his politics can feel nothing but sympathy for somebody who lost a wife, lost children, now lost an adult son who he clearly loves so much. Obviously, a guy goes to church every week. I mean, I think it's hard. It's hard to,
hard to demonize him.
It's hard to demonize him. It's hard to really truly dislike him. You can dislike his politics, but I think people who try to hate Joe Biden are just the blindest of partisans. That said, man, he is not the same guy he was when he was vice president or in the Senate. And I think the Democratic Party, I think there is nobody. I don't think Donald Trump could beat anybody in America except maybe Joe Biden. And I'm not sure, I think any other Republican could beat Biden, most likely. I think almost any other Democrat could beat Trump. So we're going to end up with two guys who might only be able to lose to each other, running against each other. I think Joe Biden, it's just, he's not what he was. And I think, when we watch him speak, when I watch him speak, he's I think he's one bad debate away or one bad moment away from like giving the presidency away. And I'm sure many Democrats privately think that and don't voice it now. They point to an incredible record of success in the legislature, in Ukraine with foreign policy, and that from the Democrats, I can't argue that. Like he's had some real successes. I think the problem for them is if he has some major, if he looks terrible next October.
If he has a Mitch McConnell moment.
If he stumbles down the stairs of Air Force One, voters make quick snap judgments, and that's what you'd have to fear as a Democrat right now. Because I know Donald Trump is not in the greatest of shape, and he is no spring chicken either, but he looks and acts much more energetic, much more charismatic than Joe Biden does, and that contrast will be on stage potentially next October.
Mike, your admiration for Governor Christie is well known, and I feel it and see it here. And I wonder, is there a moment like the one after Hurricane Sandy that so many New Jerseyans lived through, painfully, but lived through, hopefully, where a Barack Obama and a Governor Christie can come together and give an embrace that says to the American people, but to New Jerseyans, hey, we're in this together. It seems like we're so far removed from that moment. Do you think that's possible again?
I do think it's possible again. I just hope it's not brought on by tragedy. We felt that in New Jersey in 2011. We felt it as a country after September 11th, 2001. We saw people forget, right before September 11th, George W. Bush passed his first signature achievement. It was No Child Left Behind about education. The primary sponsor was Senator Kennedy, the liberal line of the U.S. Senate, and the liberal line of the Senate came together with conservative from Texas, and they found something they agreed on, and they did something together. So you can do it outside of tragedy. I feel what's happening in American politics all too often is that type of spirit of bipartisanship is more often punished now as opposed to rewarded. For Governor Christie, it was rewarded. He won big in 2013. People saw the good job he did after Sandy, and that was rewarded. And I think President Obama also was up for re-election right after. Fast forward to just a few weeks ago, Ron DeSantis did not refused to appear with Joe Biden. And Joe Biden the president came into his state, during a crisis, and it wasn't as bad as Sandy, but he refused to appear with him. I give Senator Rick Scott some credit. Senator Rick Scott went there. Senator Scott does not like Joe Biden, and Joe Biden does not like Senator Scott. They stood there and they said the right things and did the right things for their shared constituents. And so DeSantis not going there, frankly, because he was afraid to get criticized by Republicans the way Christie got criticized for Republicans. But you get elected to do a job. And part of your job, especially when there's a crisis where you need the federal government's help, is to work with the person who's the head of the federal government, and that's the president. We only have one president at a time. Whether it's your party or not, you have to work with that person. So very disappointed that Governor DeSantis didn't do that. I think Christie did the right thing. It's the most important moment of his public service life, and he did absolutely the right thing. He's been criticized by lots of Republicans for it, who think he should have put politics first and not appeared with President Obama. But I have no doubt he did the right thing, and I was proud of him for doing it.
Explain to me the way I want to explain to my mom, Nona, probably going to listen to this.
I hope Nona's listening.
No, Nona, shout out to you, Nona. Explain to me, like I'm talking to Nona, how in the world can the Republican Party nominate again Donald Trump if he's, let's leave conviction out of it, just 4 indictments. Maybe one or 2 of them, in your estimation, are really serious and worthy indictments. I don't know. Yeah. But how in the world can they nominate him, and how in the world could he win?
That's a great question. As somebody who's not voting for him and didn't vote for him, what I think is he has given voice to some of the anger in a certain element of the party and a number of people who were not in the party, who he brought into the party, working class voters who feel like they were being left behind and were sick of Bushes and Clintons just kind of trading who was in office and wanted somebody from the outside, even though he's a billionaire Ivy League guy, not exactly an outsider, but he talked like he was, and frankly, he's got tremendous charisma. He's a great speaker, and he's a great salesman, and he sells himself better than he sells just about anything else. So he is right now. He was the last Republican who took on Joe Biden. He's the Republican who beat Hillary Clinton. that gets you really far in the Republican Party. There is their major dislike for Hillary Clinton in the Republican Party.
I read that somewhere.
Yeah. So
I heard about that.
he gets a lot of kudos within the party, and he has convinced people because he's such a salesman, and you could also say a liar in this case, that the election was stolen from him when it absolutely wasn't. I mean, I do this for a living. I know how many votes come out of Philadelphia and Atlanta and Milwaukee, and he actually did better in some of the urban centers than he did in 2016. He did worse in the suburbs. So in Atlanta, he actually did better than he did in 2016. In Detroit, he did better than he did in 2016, but he got blown away in the suburbs. And but I think his voters don't see that, nor do they want to hear it. They don't hear it because Fox News was also, as you know from them having the settlement with Dominion voting machines, was selling that this thing was stolen when it clearly wasn't. And so I think they believe many of them, not all of them, but it only has to be half plus one. Half the Republican electorate thinks that he was wronged, he deserves a second term, and that he did some good things. They point to some of the foreign policy things he likes and tax cuts that he had, and the economy was strong. And so, they point to some policy things that they like, and they dismiss some of the personal pieces of it. And now they feel the Justice Department has been weaponized against them, and now more than ever they need to stand with him. I don't subscribe to it, but I think they've. It's more like it's become a sporting event. I'm putting the jersey on, and I'm rooting for my team, and nothing you can tell me tells me I shouldn't root for my team. And Trump has got that kind of loyalty, that fervent loyalty among enough. Now, in New Hampshire, 2/3 of people are voting, 2/3 of Republican primary voters are voting for somebody else. Now, he's still way ahead because he's in the mid-30s and everybody else is down by 10 or less. But that means 2/3 of Republican primary voters are looking for somebody else. And even the New York Times poll, where he was around 50% of the vote, half of that 50% said they would vote for somebody else. It's only a quarter of the Republican primary voters, and that's the hardest core voters out there are really with him. And so that means he's, I think, toast in the general election unless Joe Biden messes it up.
Well, as we wind down here, you've been so kind to join us and give us your time. I know you got a class to teach, so I know what that's like. I appreciate you joining us. You mentioned George W. Bush, and we also, again, as I mentioned earlier, meeting the day after September 11th, there was a moment of national unity there, but also a moment among the GOP cognoscenti, people like Karl Rove, who decided that, we can win Latino votes. Mm-hmm. We can maybe carve out, maybe not a lot, but some of the African-American vote. And I think George W. Bush back in 2000 may have gotten upwards of close to 40% of the Latino vote. You would know better than I. Is that vote, this more diverse vote, this non-white vote, is that vote still a possible horizon that Republicans can reach going forward, or has Trump effectively written off that electorate and his voters? Interestingly
enough, Trump did better among Latino voters the second time around. The first time around, I think there was, especially among men, and whether that's that strength that he portrays. I'm not sure, but yeah, George W. Bush got 44% in his reelection campaign, and he was very different on immigration than the party is now. So was John McCain. There was much more about welcoming and humanity. He used to say family values don't stop at the Rio Grande, and he would talk about welcoming people in and bringing them in. There was a much more there's just a much more open sense of welcoming people than we have now. But the party doesn't. A lot of people in the party don't want that. That's where the opportunity for Donald Trump came in, because there were a lot of people in the party who disagreed with George W. Bush or John McCain. I do think there's a way to go back. Actually, Chris Christie won the Hispanic vote in New Jersey in his reelection campaign. He got a quarter of the African-American vote in his reelection campaign. So I think there is that opportunity. Many Republicans, I think, make the mistake of saying we'll win more Hispanic votes because they agree with us on some of our values. They agree with us on some of the pro-business, entrepreneurial stuff. But if people don't think they like you, they don't really care what you stand for. And I think my fear in the party is that we've become a party that espouses too much negativity, almost hatefulness towards people who are different than us. And the white vote is only shrinking. And in New Jersey, we're going to be a majority-minority state. And in the next census, we're probably well over 80% white back in 1980. So, I mean, in 50 years, we're going to go from 80+% white to a majority-minority state. As a party, you can't win even if you're winning the white vote with 70% of the vote, which really not. So I just think the party should go back. We're going to have to get through this Trump time period. I'm not sure how long that is, but when it goes back, I'm more of the belief of the Bush-McCain world of, hey, maybe you're not going to win every vote, but if you can get a third, 40%, 45%, that's the right way to do it. But I think that there's both a policy difference and there's a rhetorical difference in the party now that's different than when George W. Bush was president.
Well, Mike, I'm going to get back to you on what Nona thinks of all of this at some other time. I was reading your bio before you came in, and some of the lesser-known facts about you. You're captain of the hockey team here.
I was
at Rutgers. I won't ask you if you're a Devils or Rangers fan. I'm
Devils. I'll just say it out loud. I'll say it right away.
My poor heart suffers as someone who grew up
I was at Game 7. Game 7 of the playoffs.
Very good. Well, I want you to think back to that young kid, Rutgers, playing hockey, living the life here on campus, and the future ahead of you. What would you say to that kid who's about to go into the world of politics? What would you say if you could whisper in his ear now, having had the career you've had?
I'd say probably do it all the same. I mean, of course, he wouldn't have known how I did at the time, but I would just say put your head down, work hard, and don't worry about what comes next. Just do your job at the moment, and everything else will take care of itself. And what I found is politics especially is you're not guaranteed a job for more than a few months or a year at best. And the people who do the best don't worry about what's next. They just try to do their best. And if you win, everything's going to be pretty good. Even if you lose, as long as you work hard and you're smart and you have some integrity, you're going to go pretty far in this business. And I was lucky in that the election just came fast and furious. I won the first few rounds, which gave me a little bit of reputation. I lost some in the middle, but by then I had a reputation, but just kept working hard. And I think if you keep doing that, you'll be okay. When I was in 2004, President Bush's campaign, I had a very tough region of the country, so much though that he even joked with me, saying good luck with the Northeast. But right. I got a promotion even after losing big parts of the region that I was in charge of because I was good and I worked hard. Fast forward to 2016, I was working a lot in New York where Hillary Clinton's headquarters was, and I know a lot of folks there. They were all measuring the drapes of the Oval Office and where they were going to have their offices in the White House like a month before the election. They were all thinking about what jobs they were going to have. You just can't look too far ahead in this business. You just got to do the job that's in front of you. And it's probably the same would be true in any business. In politics, when there's an election day, you just work hard, work toward that. Don't have your eye on next year or the year after that. Just do your job and work hard, and most importantly, do something you love. Try to get involved in either a campaign or a profession that you love. Everything else will take care of itself. Sage advice. I didn't know that at the time, but looking back, I kind of went along that path in a way that served me well. Well, again, good advice at any age. Yeah, thanks. Mike DuHaime, really appreciate you joining us on This Moment in Democracy. It's been an absolute pleasure. Pleasure, Dean. Thanks. Great questions. Thanks very much for having me. Today's podcast was recorded at the Miller Center for Community Protection and Resilience and brought to you by the Eagleton Institute of Politics. Eagleton is a nonpartisan research unit of Rutgers University, New Brunswick. This Moment in Democracy was made possible in part by the generosity of Gerald and Kiko Harvey and Eagleton's many supporters. To support Eagleton's work or sign up for its newsletter, click the links in the description. Please help support the work we do at This Moment in Democracy. Visit our podcast page at eagleton.rutgers.edu to learn more. We want to hear from our listeners. Email us at podcast@eagleton.rutgers.edu to send in your comments about today's episode or suggest topics that you want to hear about. Once again, that's it for This Moment in Democracy.